Hello. Welcome to Baking Eucharistic Bread. There is a beauty and a depth to the theology of the Eucharist, right down to the process of making the Eucharistic bread. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to bake some bread. First of all, let's talk about the ingredients. They're really, really basic. You have some warm water, and for this recipe, we use 2 different types of wheat flour. Now, there are 3 significant things about these ingredients. First of all is the simplicity. They're simple for a reason. It's supposed to be easy to make, accessible to anybody. All you need is flour and water. Now, it is like this because we're not supposed to add anything. We're not supposed to add delicious flavors or try to find ways that we can make it more delicious. It is going to become Jesus. It's going to become something spectacular, and we don't really need to help God to do that. We just make the basic matter for God to use. Second of all, it's representative of our own gifts and talents and needs. We take these very basic things that we've been given and we offer them back to God. God takes those gifts and he makes something amazing. And that's what's represented by the simplicity of the ingredients of the Eucharist. Second significant thing. You'll notice that there is an important ingredient missing when you usually make bread, and that's yeast. It is totally necessary that Eucharistic bread be unleavened. Again, couple reasons for this. Unleavened bread was what Jesus used at the Last Supper. What we do in the Eucharist is remembering and participating in that sacrifice and in that Last Supper, in that very same meal. The reason Jesus used unleavened bread was because he was celebrating Passover. Passover reminds us of the liberation of Israelites from Egypt. At the very first Passover, they didn't have time to sit around and wait for their bread to rise because they were a people on the move. They were in the process of being saved. So they ate unleavened bread, and for the thousands of years that Passover has been commemorated, unleavened bread has been eaten for that reason. So that's why we eat unleavened bread in the Eucharist. Jesus used it at the Last Supper, and it's reminiscent of the Passover. The Passover reminds us that we are saved and liberated by God. The final thing that is significant about these ingredients is the fact that it has to be wheat flour. Now, today, there are more and more gluten intolerances or gluten allergies. And because of this, the church has actually been criticized by many people because of the rigidity that they've maintained with only allowing wheat flour. But there's an important reason that they only allow wheat flour, and this has to do with the scriptural significance. Wheat is talked about a lot in Scripture, particularly the New Testament. And when it's talked about, it's referenced as being sown, fallen, crushed, buried, and generating new plants, new life. What does this process remind us of? The Paschal mystery. So, the symbolism of the wheat falling to the earth, dying, generating new plants, being crushed and turned into bread, reminds us of Jesus' death and resurrection. And this is important. And this symbolism is something that could be lost if we were to use a different type of flour that was processed in a different way, or with seeds that were used in a different way. Also, if somebody does have a problem with gluten, today there is a low gluten form of the Eucharist that many parishes use for people who can tolerate maybe a little. And for somebody who can't tolerate any sort of gluten, they can just receive the wine, because we believe that Jesus is fully present in both the bread and the wine, so they're not missing out on anything. They're fully receiving Jesus. They're fully participating in communion, in the same way that if you only took the bread, you would be fully receiving Jesus. If you only took the cup, you're fully receiving Jesus. So that's an option for people who maybe can't tolerate the wheat. Anyway, those are some significant things about the ingredients, and gives you a little bit of background. And now, let's bake some bread. preheating the oven to 350. Next, we're going to measure out the ingredients to 2.5 cups of whole wheat flour, 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour, and 1¼ cups of very warm water. All right, I've combined all the ingredients into a bowl, so let's mix it. Okay, once it's all mixed together, you're gonna have a lump of dough like this. Easiest thing to do is to put olive oil on your hands because we're gonna need it and it's gonna get pretty sticky. So we need it for a while to get all the bubbles and everything like that out. So the recipe I'm following recommends breaking it up into smaller loaves like I'm doing right here. And then I'm gonna knead them a little bit more in their little loaves and roll them out with a roller so that they're nice and flat and that they'll cook evenly. All right, so I've got them rolled out into very thin patties, round patties, and I'm gonna cover them with a wet, damp cloth. This is just gonna give them a little bit of moisture so that they don't get crusty. I'm gonna let them sit like this for about 5 minutes. All right, so they have sat under the damp cloth for a little while, and it is traditional to put some sort of mark on the bread, like a cross or a Cairo. So I am going to use a knife to put the indentation of a cross on all these different loaves, just to keep with tradition. All right, we're ready to bake. So I'm gonna put them in the oven and cook them for about 20 minutes or until they get darker in color. All right, I think it's time. I think the bread's done, so let's take a look. Not bad, looks pretty good. So we're done. I have 6 loaves of beautiful unleavened bread, ready to be broken and shared after they are consecrated into the Eucharist. This practice of making Eucharistic bread in the home is something that's done in a variety of parishes actually all over the country. And it's a really cool way for families to participate even more in the Eucharist and in the Mass in this special way. These loaves in particular, though, I'm going to take and cut up so that we can sample them and taste what homemade Eucharistic unleavened bread tastes like. Thank you for joining me for baking Eucharistic bread. I hope you learned something, and let's eat some bread.